Corn School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Headline Amp Fungicide and Pride Seeds.
Bernard Tobin, joined now by BASF agronomist Rob Miller. Rob, how's it going?
Just hanging in there. How are you doing?
We're doing all right. We're getting a chance to talk to people like you. Don't get out in the field as much, obviously, with the pandemic, but we want to get some information out to growers. And, hey, maybe a quick question for you. From a BASF perspective, how are things looking, from a business perspective right now?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously we have some challenges here, but for the most part, we're kind of on track in terms of the product delivery, both from a seed and a crop protection standpoint. So most of our deliveries actually occur in the month of April. So we don't see any challenges affiliated with that. For the moment, everything's kind of on par. So we're trying to get things in place and get things in growers' yards for sure.
Good stuff. Hey, want to talk weed control today? About this time last year, you and I would be out in the field, walking around, doing interviews. Not going to get out there this year, but you have had an opportunity to get out and walk a few fields. What do you look for this time of year? Now, it's early April.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely. So I've had the opportunity to go out into the field at the research farm for one day. And for the most part, we're seeing the winter annuals, especially those perennial weeds. The weeds that were not controlled in the fall, they're basically a month ahead of schedule. So basically even 2 months ahead of schedule compared to last year. So we've seen a lot of chickweed, we're seeing some fleabane, and even some fleabane, large rosettes, large root masses. So when we go in to do our planting in a few weeks, hopefully some of those weeds are going to be fairly big. So we're going to have to look at controlling some of those winter annual weeds for sure. Residue management as well. We had a delayed corn harvest in eastern Canada last year. And with that delay in harvest, we weren't able to do a lot of fall tillage. So we're seeing a lot of residue there. So how are we setting that up for soybeans? We're going to have to take that into consideration as well. But for the most part, things are drying quickly, but we do have a couple of weeks here to see how we can get stuff in the ground for sure.
I want to talk a little bit about carryover, something that probably should be on people's radars this year. Had a late spring last year, late planting, a lot of chemical went down late. This year it's going to get down early. Any thoughts on carryover?
Yeah, definitely. So it's not really anything to be too concerned about, but maybe just something to have on our radar because we might see a little bit in some of the overlaps. So if you remember last year, most of the crop got in the ground in the month of June and, was sprayed end of June, first part of July. Now potentially we could be 1 month earlier. So especially with planting. So that kind of shortens that interval in terms of microbial breakdown for most of the herbicides. So we might see a little bit more. We won't see that across the entire field, probably maybe just a little bit more on some of the overlaps, maybe along the headland. So don't be surprised if we see that, whether it's from a corn or soybean perspective. But we do all of our testing in terms of for registration at 2x rates to simulate an overlap. So we're fairly confident that there won't be any yield loss or anything like that. But it's just something to be aware of with any of those residual products that we've used in the past that might have been sprayed a little bit later last year.
I want to talk about pre-emergence, Rob. I mean, we're getting into mid-April. Things are working out pretty well if we don't get a lot of rain. A lot of pre-emerge would probably go down early this year. And, it's potential that, we might get a cold snap and it might sit a while. What do you say to people about getting pre-emerge down earlier this year, and what the implications are for weed control going forward?
Yes, definitely. So we do have the potential to be setting ourselves up to get the crop in a little bit earlier, hopefully much earlier than last year. And when you think about even the last couple of years, we've gone in there in May and June, and the crop came out of the ground within a week. And when you think about using a soil-applied residual herbicide, they're really only supposed to last until we get to crop canopy. Crop canopy is your best friend when it comes to weed control. So we're just trying to, by that time, control those weeds until the crop does reach full canopy closure. Thing is, this year we might be, potentially be planting a little bit earlier. The crop might be slower to emerge, might take 2-3 weeks to come out of the ground. And if that herbicide's on earlier, we're asking that herbicide to have a little bit longer activity. Typically we might be 4 to 6 weeks, but if we are in earlier Planting might be more 6 to 8 weeks. So don't be surprised if we do have to go in there and control some of these weeds with an in-crop application. Overall, a two-pass program, whether it's corn or soybeans, is the most consistent weed control program out there, maximizing your yield potential, but also setting your crop up for success and reducing that seed bank later on. So, if you are planning on doing some herbicide applications in the crop, say end of April, first part of May, and we're trying to get that to canopy closure, we might actually have to go in there with an in-crop herbicide with some residual as well to get through that. But overall, that's a really sound weed control management, and overall, just really good recommendation.
Any thoughts on burn down, Rob? It's a critical importance to get that done early. Get those first flush if you can.
Yes, definitely. So, just like the winter wheat has greened up, so has a lot of those winter annual weeds. Canada Fleabane would be the biggest one that we have here in Eastern Canada, and more so in Ontario and spreading into Quebec. So we want to make sure that we control that Fleabane prior to bolting. So a lot of it does have a really large rosette, and we did some work a couple years ago where when you get a 4-inch rosette, that root system is actually going down about 9 inches. So it's a really large root system that's basically feeding that factory, and it's taking all the energy from the roots and putting it up into vegetative growth. So it's really tough to control some of those larger winter annual weeds. Even the weeds that might be the size of a toonie, when you actually look at it from up above, that root system is still going down, say 4 or 5 inches. So that stuff's really going to be tough to control. So that's where we really have to use multiple effective modes of action. So that's where we want to use, if glyphosate's no longer effective, make sure we add in a product and 2 products that actually have activity on those glyphosate resistant weeds. Water volume as well. It doesn't matter if it's the conventional chemistry, Extend technology, Aragon as well. Higher water volumes is the best recommendation to control some of those larger weeds. So we recommend 20 gallons per acre, because majority of our complaints from escapes from some of these resistant weeds and larger weeds also comes from when we start using water volumes of 15 gallons or less. So even when we're using the Extend technology, we're using the extremely coarse to ultra coarse droplets. So it's a larger droplet size. So that's where we have to increase the water volume, especially to get better activity on some of those grasses. Another thing to keep in mind is when we're dealing with some of these larger perennial weeds, and especially once the dandelions start to flower when the temperatures warm up, maintain that rate of glyphosate. So don't start shaving the rate of glyphosate. We want to base it on the size of the weed. Even if you are adding in a broadleaf herbicide like dicamba or 2,4-D, we still want to maintain that effective rate of glyphosate. So 1.5 to 2 liters equivalent of the old standard formulation of glyphosate. That was where we would actually recommend that, and then top it up with the additional herbicides.
Hey, Rob, great stuff, great insights. Thanks for taking the time. As I say, hopefully everybody will get rolling, and we'll all get back in the field pretty soon.
Yes, definitely, for sure.